Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest live hangout. I see we have more than one skeleton hand today,
Yeah.
which I really like. So today we're answering questions from 7th and 8th graders at Nolan Richardson Middle School, the Jaguars. Shout out to the Jaguars and
Yay,
their librarian,
Jaguars. Go
Mr.
Jag.
Lopez. Woo! So these are their leftover questions after we've already Skyped with their students. And let's dive right in. So first of all, let's find out who's here though. Before we dive in, no diving just yet. So I'm Kim Ventrella, author of this book, Skeleton Tree, and about to come out Bone Hollow. And who's our other witchy hat person here?
So I'm Cynthia Reeg, author of From the Grave and Into the Shadowlands Monster Adventures.
Woo! Okay. And what about Poe? I see Poe lurking.
Hello, my name is Edgar Allan Poe. I am the author of loads of poems and stories that you should all read. And behind me is Samantha Clark. Hello, my name is Samantha Clark. I am hanging out with Edgar Allan Poe today, but I am the author of this book, The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast.
Woo, woo. Sarah, what about you?
Hi there, I'm Sarah Cannon, and I'm the author of this levitating title.
Whoa.
Super creepy.
It levitates so wonderfully.
As long as it doesn't whack me in the head, that's okay.
And Jonathan, last but not least.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Rosen, and I'm the author of, wrong order, but Night of the Living Cuddle Bunnies,
Yay.
and the sequel From Sunset Till Sunrise.
All right.
I love it. Jonathan, did you get a haircut? You're looking snazzy today.
I did get a haircut last week. So.
Nice. Just for the students.
Right, absolutely.
Middle school. Okay, awesome. Well, diving right in, we're going to go to Cynthia first. How old were you when you bought your first book?
Okay, that was a kind of a tough one actually, because as a kid we didn't have much money, and so it probably wasn't until about 4th or 5th grade when I got to buy maybe one of those paperbacks from the school order form, And but the thing that my parents did do when I was very little is they bought World Book Encyclopedia, and it came with a whole childcraft set of books. And in that were the nursery rhymes and the fairy tales. And for me, I gobbled up literally the fairy tales. And that's where my love for fantasy and spooky things and monsters all started.
Nice. I'm just picturing you literally gobbling them up now.
Yeah, I'd kind of tie down my little brother and read to him, make him listen. So.
Nice.
Terrifying for life.
I know. It's like the Monster Book of Monsters in reverse because you're eating the book. No.
How many people here read cereal boxes, toothpaste tubes, like literally everything?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And Poe as well, I'm sure. Sure he was a reader.
Yes.
I meant that I read Poe, but yes.
Okay, so we have another question from the students. How do you write a full novel without losing inspiration midway or just losing interest? So let's go to Poe/Samantha.
Well, when I don't really write that much anymore, so I'm going to let Samantha answer this one. Hi. So I'm going to answer for Poe because he's a bit shy today. But for me, it's really comes down to the story. Like, I think that's two questions actually. There's two ways of answering this, and for one, keeping up my inspiration for the writing the story is I have to figure out what's going on in the story. And sometimes if I feel like I'm getting bored, it's because I don't know what's coming up. I don't know what's happening. So I do research, or I'll brainstorm a bunch of different ideas until something is exciting me again. And then I can keep going and I can write the story. But on top of that, I think there's a second part of that question, because if the story is flagging, then I get bored just reading it and just writing it. So another thing that I do is at the beginning of every chapter, I put in a little note where I say what the motivation of the character is, what the character wants in this scene, because the character's motivation is going to change throughout the book. And in every scene, there's something that they want. If you're a kid, you go into your kitchen and there's a reason you went into your kitchen. You didn't go in there to play PlayStation. You went in there maybe to make a sandwich. So you have to know what that motivation is for that particular scene. And by doing that, it helps me to remind me what that motivation is, and it puts that drive into the scene while I'm writing it, while I'm reading it back to myself. And then having that drive, it takes all the boredom out of it, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. You totally like hit the nail on the head for me. Like, that was my answer basically, is that there's two things that could be going on if you're getting really bored. And so this is kind of similar to writer's block. Like when you're writing a story and then you just lose interest, to me, I'm thinking writer's block. And with writer's block, it's either I'm just in a really bad mood. So it's just like something that has to do with me, right? And it's not something that has to do with the story. Or it's the opposite. And it's actually that the story isn't working, but I'm trying to force it. And so my tip is that when it's really early on, at least from my experience, I couldn't tell the difference between those two things. So my suggestion, if you're just starting out, would be to go ahead and push yourself to finish it if you're just starting out, because you have to learn how to write a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you can never learn how to write an end until you actually do it a bunch of times. So even if you're not really feeling it, I would suggest that you go ahead and finish your first few projects, because it's really hard to tell the difference between just like, I feel yucky today and the story is actually not working. Now that I've kind of progressed and I've sold a few books, I'm a little bit better at telling the difference. Okay, like, here's what I need to do is I need to go back and look at my story and see, like, what are all the main story points? And is it actually something that's wrong in the story? Like something's missing? I've missed some of the really important beats that are happening. Is that why I'm not feeling this? Because the story is just broken? Or is it just that today I feel a little broken, so I should just wait till tomorrow and maybe read some books for inspiration today, and then hopefully tomorrow I'll come back and my interest will be back in the story because I'm just feeling less yucky. So now I can kind of tell the difference, and so I don't necessarily finish everything I start, because sometimes I'm just like, okay, this was like a practice run and now it's led me to a new idea, and so I don't feel like I have to force myself to finish every single thing I start, because I'm a little bit wiser about the process now. But starting out, I would say go ahead and finish it. And the way to make yourself do that, it's really, really hard. You kind of just have to do it. But if you can get writer friends that will hold you accountable for that, that's a tip too. So see if you can join a writing group or find some other friends who are interested in writing, and they will push you to finish those early projects. Okay. Yes.
And maybe just one more little quick thing too is you don't have to start out to write a whole 100,000 word novel. Just start with a short story and finish those, and then you get an idea of beginning, middle, and end too.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Start short. And like talking about 100,000 word novels, I don't even write those now. So,
no, me neither.
I mean, come on. That's beyond me. So, okay, let's move on. And this one is specifically for Cynthia. It's for the author with the basement. And that is Cynthia, because she had talked about she has this basement with an embalming table in it. So have you ever been inspired by your embalming table?
It's only recently that I even found out it was an embalming table. We've only lived in this house about 1.5 years now. So it's not something you just really expect. And so I thought it was just a table. So it took me a while to discover it, but I had a friend who used to work at a funeral home, and he came and he checked it out and he said, yes, that is an embalming table. But for me, I haven't used it yet. Not to say it's not coming up soon, but I can be inspired by most anything. And I think that's what's cool about being a writer, that it's all around you in the world, all around you. So don't discard anything. You can put your twist on it and make it, work out for your story. But I did live in a kind of another spooky old house when I was about you guys' age, and the basement there was equally creepy. And so that was my first story that I wrote that had a basement in it. And I entered it in a local newspaper contest. And that was one of my first short stories I had published. So that was fun.
Nice. Okay, so the basements are kind of inspiring. I think for sure, creepy basements. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely inspiring. So the next question, we're going to kind of go back to Cynthia a little bit, although let's broaden it out. The question was, have you ever seen a haunting in Connecticut? And I think the answer for us is, unfortunately, we haven't seen it. But it sounds really scary. So Cynthia, have you seen another like spooky horror movie that has really inspired you?
Uh-oh, did you lose me?
Oh, did I lose you? We're
I can hear you.
talking scary movies. Or
there I'm back. Okay. It's kind of funny, but I don't enjoy watching super scary movies. I just went to see Glass with my husband, which wasn't super duper scary, but it was scary enough for me. I'd rather be in control of my monsters.
Yeah, that makes sense. You'd rather write them yourself. That way you know it's going to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who they're going to get. Okay, so talking about horror. Who was into horror as a kid? Sarah, were you into horror?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I was. I was always that kid that ordered a bunch of books from the Scholastic book orders. Like when I had money, that was where it went. And sometimes there would be books of scary stories in there. And I still remember reading some creepy one about a skunk with a ghost's face instead of its own face. Like, I still remember this story because it was just so strange, right? That it's scary because it's strange. So, I always read things like that. And then, of course, as I got older, I read Stephen King. I agree with Cynthia that I struggle more with scary movies. Like, I can read the scariest book on the face of the earth, but there's something about the movie. It's harder to shut or put down. It's something you're more expected to experience in a linear fashion. And also, my imagination already does a ton of the work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need help. So that's another reason that I watch scary things cautiously. And when I started watching The Walking Dead, I read recaps before I watched it. And then I watched it with the volume off for a while until I thought, okay, now I'm all right.
That's so funny. I think I'm such a horrible snake because I cannot get scared by scary, deepest desires is to actually scares me because I hate it. But I love horror and the supernatural. And I think that's why I love it, because I am such a cynic. So I'm always looking for something that just gets me, sparks my imagination and makes me actually think that maybe there are some possibilities beyond the ordinary, because actually I don't really believe in those possibilities, but I want to believe in them. That's my motto in life. But yes, horror, I've always loved horror. I've mentioned it a lot of times, but my very first scary story I wrote, or my very first story I remember writing, was a version of a Roald Dahl short story called The Landlady. And in that story, the elderly woman who owns the guest house murders and taxidermies her guests and kind of poses them around the guest house. And so I wrote my own version of this in second grade, and it placed in a writing contest. So I have always been into it. And the Addams Family, like all of the older versions of the Addams Family, I was really into when I was younger too. So I've always loved spooky. And
you didn't get a call from the principal?
I didn't. No, they picked it. Who knew? Who knew? Although I did get called out later in high school because I dressed like super goth, like kind of like really scary goth. But yeah, but they couldn't do anything even then because I was like a straight A student who dressed super goth. So anyways, so moving on from the spooky, let's get musical. Let's talk about musicals for a minute. So would you like a musical made about your book? I mean, come on, of course. But Cynthia, what do you think the musical of your book?
Okay, so yeah, of course I'd love it. I'd love to see the little monsters come to life. So I've already got a song in mind, and it would be, and I'm such a terrible singer, so bear with me, but it would be, so if you're scary and you know it, clap your claws. Okay. All right. That's all I'll make you suffer through.
What do you mean? It was gorgeous. I love it. I love it. Okay, I'm definitely going to be clapping my claws from the rest of the day now. Okay, so let's go back to writing. We had a question. Now, this is a big one. What are your best tips for aspiring authors? So we're going to have to kind of narrow it down. But Sarah, best tips for aspiring authors?
Well, obviously, one of them is just to kind of read everything. I know we had a student ask us what other genres we read besides spooky. And, the answer is just stay open to everything. Like, read what you like and don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't like what you're reading, first of all. So if what you like is graphic novels, comics, scary stories, like fan fiction, it doesn't matter. Read it and read a lot of it, because you're going to learn to discern between it being done well and moments that you're thinking about it critically and you're like, I think I could do that better, or so-and-so did that better. So that's a learning process. But, also read in your literature classes and don't be like, oh, because your teacher's making you read something that's not your thing. Because I still remember like that creepy poem about Ozymandias in high school and like his kingdom being buried in the sands and the rough beast slouching to be born. Like all that stuff is like awesome material. So that would be my top recommendation. But also just, we've already touched on, find other people that are also enjoying writing. Join the Young Writers Program for National Novel Writing Month and team up with people and meet up with them after school and write together, because that sense of community can make writing feel much less isolating and make it feel less, I think sometimes because it's more mysterious than filling out a job application and going in for a job interview, it can feel like you've got to win the golden ticket to actually like get a book published. And the more you hang out with other people who are working toward the same goal, the more attainable it's going to feel.
Yeah, totally. I love what you said about writing feeling kind of mysterious up front, because that's so how it is for me. And it's partly because it's like translating something from another language. You have a story in your head, and how can you translate that into words that are on paper, and then have a total stranger read those words and get the same picture that you had in your head, right? That's some pretty like complicated translation. But my tip for aspiring writers would be, even though it seems like this very big and mysterious task that maybe you can never wrap your mind around, you actually can. And that comes from tiny bits of practice that just build up over time. So like Sarah said, it starts with reading, and every story you read, you may not realize it, but you're learning about how stories work. And then every story you write, that's the other side of it. You're also learning how it works, and you're learning about that translation process, which you can learn about from writing, but you also need to like be putting the words down on paper to learn how that works as well. The more you do it, the more it becomes demystified. So you have to be, when you're starting out, just be willing to sit in that space of mystery and uncertainty for a while, and just know that it's not all going to be like totally clear to you at first. Like you're not going to start writing and be like, oh, now I know how to write a novel. You just have to do it little by little. Start small, start with short stories, build up, start with just a couple of characters, build up to more characters. Just always start small and be building up, and little by little, you'll start to figure out, okay, this is how you can write an entire story, and not just any story, but you can turn it into a really good story. And then, of course, the main piece of advice that you always give is just don't give up, because everybody gets rejected. Every big author that your favorite author of all time got rejected a ton of times. No matter who that person is, they got rejected. And the one thing that separates the amateur writer from the professional is that the professionals are just the people that never gave up. So
yes, so true.
Yeah, is that for Poe? Is that true for you as well?
That is so true. I got so many pictures, you just don't know.
Okay. I
Keep
figured.
going, kids. Keep going. He's very smart.
I didn't know Poe was this inspirational, but okay, I love it. So Jonathan, we haven't heard from you and your brand new haircut this whole time. So what can inspire a story? Please tell us.
I was thinking, when I saw that I had this question, I was thinking a lot about this. Really, and I talk to kids all the time, stories can be inspired from anywhere and anything. And it all starts with a what if. And that's, for Night of the Living Cuddle Bunnies, what if the hot Christmas toy comes to life, but, and was evil. For me, when I was a kid, I always looked at things around, even in school, I daydreamed a lot. What if I could go in through the blackboard to another place? What if I could, fly through the window over there? But it's always, you just look around and what if, and what characteristics, what story you could make just from out of anything. Anything could inspire a story. And even walking down the street now, I'll just see something, hey, that would make a good story. And I text it to myself to remember later. But really, stories can come from anything.
Yeah, totally. And let's see, who else are we going to grill with this question? Oh, Samantha and Poe. What inspires a story?
Ravens inspire stories. They always inspire stories. I fully agree with what Jonathan said. What if stories, just looking around, everywhere there is. And one of the things that I do, I think a lot of research as well will inspire stories, right, Poe? Yes. So one of the things that I have is there's two e-newsletters that I subscribe to. I've subscribed to different ones over the years, but the two that I currently read a lot regularly are one from National Geographic, and it's free, and it comes, I think, every Wednesday, and it's just odd stories from around the world from National Geographic. And occasionally in the subject line, it talks about animals killing animals, and then I don't look at that one. I just delete it, and I wait for the next week because I'm a softie and I can't watch those videos. But they have amazing articles in there about some strange spider that they've just found, or something to do with space that just inspires different story ideas, because you read about the real life. There's so much amazing things that go on in our real life, and then from there we can ask questions about it. Like Jonathan said, what if this magical, this strange spider that they have just discovered, was discovered in a shoe, or it was brought to school. I'm getting onto Spider-Man here, but there are lots of ways to come up with ideas. And there's another one. There's a BBC e-newsletter that is something like six news stories you should read this week, something like that. And I find the most fascinating stories in there. There was one about a town in America that has a population of one. Just one person lives in this town. She runs the library. She runs, it has a library. There's only one person that lives in it. It has a library. And it was
so cool.
I know, it's so cool. It was fascinating. They had this whole video with her. And then there was another video that I saw of this guy in Italy who he was retired and he loved books, and he knew that there were a lot of kids who didn't have money, and they in the rural areas. So he transformed this whole truck into a library, and he goes around delivering books to these kids all over the place now that he's retired all the time. So finding those kind of things, when Cynthia talked about her encyclopedia, I really, really wish that print encyclopedias were still around much more than they are now. Everything's gone online and people don't really buy those big encyclopedias anymore. But when I was a kid, I used to read the encyclopedia because it would have pictures in there of strange things. And, I could just flip through, and anything that caught my eye, I could read about it. But when you're doing it online, you're looking for something specific. So you're not going to find just the odd things that might spur an idea. So I highly recommend to anybody, in the library, you will probably find encyclopedias. And I recommend going and into the library and just sitting there, flipping through those and the encyclopedia, during a lunch break, during a break, and just seeing what catches your eye. When Sarah was talking about reading different books, go through, read books, read nonfiction books too, and fiction books that are completely out of, the normal thing that you would like, because those things are going to spur ideas too. Poe approves. Yes.
Yes.
And read about ravens.
That's so cool. And I like that Jonathan's now traveling. So we're doing travels with Jonathan. He's in the beautiful outdoors. And I bet it's a lot warmer than...
The dog picked this time to need to be walked.
Of course. You can't
I had it on
me
barking like crazy. Yes.
Okay. I love it. Well, then let's talk about character designs. We had a question for Sarah about how do you make character designs?
Okay, so the phrase character designs, I kind of associate that with animation, actually, and art, visual arts. But if you're talking about how we kind of put characters together beginning to end, usually my story idea comes before my characters. And that kind of helps me figure it out, actually. Because, for example, with Oddity, I knew I wanted to write about a really creepy town. And I thought, well, I've seen stories about kids that move to a town and they're like, whoa, this is creepy. And I thought, I want to write one about a kid who already lives there and is like, no, this is normal, but that over there is not right, And so that helped me know that I needed a character who was confident, who wasn't afraid to go get into tough situations. And that also made me think about her weakness, which is that because she's such a good leader, sometimes she's a little bit overconfident. And then she misses information that might be important later, or she doesn't know that her friends are mad at her until they yell at her, because she's just confidently forging ahead, and she's not stopping to notice that people are becoming increasingly crabby over here as she leads them into more and more danger. So that's one thing, is, I let the plot kind of fuel the character. But, also sometimes I just am having fun with little odd idiosyncrasies that I've noticed in people in the world around me. Writers, we're all kind of creepy in the sense that we're watching people all the time. And sometimes we see someone and we go, huh, and then we sit there and we think about, why was that person doing that? And why did that seem like a reasonable response? Or there might just be someone we really like, I think I've mentioned in other group chats that I almost always have a coffee shop in my book. I almost always have a small business owner, because they're the glue that holds a community together. So then I think about the ones that I've liked. Are they, do I want to write someone who's like the guy that yells at all the other customers, but kind of likes my 12-year-old? Or do I want to write about the one that has a kid of her own that comes and asks me really weird knock-knock jokes while I'm trying to write? And so, yeah, creating characters is always really fun. Everything physical appearance for me comes after that. Names usually come after that and are kind of based on place. So I think I mentioned most of the kids in Oddity are named after grandparents. But I'll also research different ethnic groups that make up an area. Where I lived in upstate New York, there's a lot of Dutch heritage because it was originally colonized by the Dutch. So I got to learn a lot about Dutch history, Dutch last names. Native Americans in that area were mostly from the Iroquois Nation. So, then I was kind of looking in phone books for names that I had seen in genealogy sites and that kind of thing.
Nice. Okay, Poe, what do you have to say on the subject?
I make them all have wings like ravens. No. Everything that Sarah said, and so for me with character design, my oh, I lost you. In my books, funnily enough, I actually don't put a lot of description of the characters themselves. I have friends who, so I'm going to mostly talk about what some other friends do, but then what I do. A lot of friends of mine will actually go online. They'll look up pictures. They will go through magazines. They will cut out, even actors or models or just, regular kids who they think physically embody the characters that they're writing about. For me, I can never really, I don't really see the characters completely in my head, what they look like. I can see little pieces, but it's more about the personality. It's more about the inside. I can more embody the character and then see through them, see through their eyes, if that makes sense. So I don't have a lot of descriptions in my books, but what I do when I'm designing a character is literally will kind of come to them through, allow them to come to me, and just I'll look through their eyes and see what the world looks like through their experiences and through their thoughts and their feelings. So if somebody is very insecure, they're going to see a crowded room in a very different way from somebody who's very confident. And they're going to describe those things in very, very different ways. So I do a lot of brainstorming, but a lot of that will come through with the writing. With this book, I didn't know the boy all that much until I got to the end of the first draft. It wasn't this book really only has mainly one character for the majority of the book. It's really just the boy. And when it wasn't until I got to the end of the first draft that I really realized A, what the story was about, and B, who this character really truly was. I didn't know that he was struggling with fears and insecurities, and that really is the whole theme of the book. So all of that came into revision. So I have to write to get used to the characters. I write scenes from their point of view, even the secondary characters. I will turn a scene around and write it from their point of view. I'll have conversations with people. There's also a lot of people, there's questionnaires that you can find online, which talks about things like, what's your character's favorite ice cream, or what would they do in this point? What was a significant point, of their childhood? Well, again, I don't really know any of that until I have written more. So I don't really use questionnaires either. I just write. I write scenes with the characters, having conversations, even if they're never going to make it into the book. By writing, by experiencing them, that's the way I get to know my characters. And I feel like they're the ones, it's not my job to create them, it's my job to learn who they are and then portray them, if that makes any sense. I also, when I'm walking my dog, when I'm driving in the car, I'll stick them in my head and I'll say, all right, guys, play. Yeah. And I'll see what they do. And then I get to know them in that way as well. And Poe does the same, I think.
Yes, I was about to say. Interesting. Well, we are so similar, Poe and Sam and I, on our character creation, I think. But this last question is for Mr. Rosen. So I hope you're ready. Now, our school that we're answering questions from is based in El Paso. So they would like to know, which part of El Paso is this story? Because you mentioned the story that you're working on set in El Paso. So what part of El Paso is that story based in?
Well, before I go on, I always used to tell my students that the Raven always used to get angry at Poe because he felt he was misquoted. So I always started my lessons with that. But now, as for this story, I don't like talking too much about it because this might never be a book. It's just something that I finished, so who knows what will happen.
Be
But-
an optimist, Jen. Come on.
That's true. That's true. But okay, the story doesn't have a lot in El Paso. The main character is from El Paso, but it really goes to a lot of Texas. So it has ghosts and witches and magic and spooky things in it too. But if I had to pick one area from El Paso that he comes from, I would think it's probably, in my mind, it was the upper northeast corner, close to the New Mexico border, right around, which would probably be present-day Loma Franklin Drive. That's where I think that it probably is.
Your dog agrees.
Yes, he is.
I know. Your dog wants to add something, I
That's
think.
it.
Okay, so would you ever consider, though, because I know this is a question they didn't ask, but they're thinking, would you consider having a student from Nolan Richardson Middle School be part of your story? I mean, come on.
Well, if I look correctly, I do think Nolan Richardson is on Loma Franklin Drive, coincidentally. So, but yes. So I would love any input from all the students at Nolan Richardson.
Okay, we're posting email address, number right now, so they can just contact you with all of those ideas.
Absolutely.
But that is our last question. So we are very happy to answer these questions, and we're also happy to Skype or do a Google Hangout or in some way talk to your students about writing, and they can ask us all of their burning questions about writing process and what it's like to be an author. We are from spookymiddlegrade.com. So if you just head over to that website, click on the free Skype session, and you can schedule your session there. And if we have any leftover questions, then we will answer those on our YouTube channel. So thanks to everyone for joining us. And
Thank you.
Yep.
And spooky afternoon.
Yes, stay spooky.
Yes.
Yep, stay spooky, everyone. And I'm assuming, Cynthia and everyone else, that we are going to wear these costumes all day.
Oh, yeah.
So
To the burger.
right now. Okay.
Photos or it didn't happen.
Yes. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.